Gaming and BS episode 158, coming to you Tuesday, September 26th, 2017. All right, welcome to Gaming and BS, a tabletop RPG podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sean.
And I'm Brett. Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you all back on board.
Oh, we've got a special guest this show.
Exactly. So let's see. He is an author. He's written HeroClix and Pomp, which is a really cool book. He has produced Beyond the Silver Scream, a little DCC module, and you know him, you love him, Forrest Aguirre. Hey, Forrest, how you doing, man?
Hello. I'm doing great. Thank you.
So Forrest had given us the topic idea for the show, and Sean and I were noodling on it. I'm like, you know what? We know this guy. His name's Forrest. He gave us the topic, for Christ's sake. Let's pull him on. And he's a Madison kid. We could talk about this. So we got him on board. And as we've done before, we'll use him as we need him and then cast him aside as so much chaff once we're done. So
that's the story of my life.
All right. So announcements. Let's see. GameholeCon registrations still going down. I think the pre-reg is closing down pretty quick, though. So if you're not going to GameholeCon.com and you're in the Madison area, the hell's wrong with you? Get there. Forrest will be there. Sean and I will be there. A host of really cool, fun gaming people will be there. Check it out. GameholeCon.com, of course. Sean, anything else you want to add about Gamehole?
Uber. The Uber is available. Email gamingandbs@gmail.com if you need a ride from the Madison airport. Thursday of GameholeCon. Beer, we have our ad done. So free beer Saturday night. Show up at the Clarion. I believe that kicks off around the 8 o'clock hour.
There's a beer exchange on Friday, is there not?
There is. I haven't propagated that as well as we should.
But we like a hostage exchange?
Kind of.
Yes,
of like that, but with more alcohol.
But with beer. Yeah.
Let's see. EverCon, the gaming convention that I help run in central Wisconsin, in the Wausau area, that is happening in January, first part of the year. So, as I like to say, you're going to start your year off right, go to gaming convention and get somewhere warm, huddle up with your buddies and game. Evercon.org. Submissions pre-reg is open, the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a 3-day con. It's $35 if you pre-reg. Otherwise, it's a little bit higher at the door. So be cool. Pre-reg, get your game in there and do some cool stuff. I was just talking to Corey Wynn, friend of the show, supporter of the show, and Corey's going to step up and come on down. He was there last year with a couple of his brothers and some of his kids, so I think he and the daughters are coming again this year, so that'll be a lot of fun. Cool stuff happening. Let's see, my Avalon Kickstarter. Yes, I mentioned this last show. I had a meeting with John Arcadian, Phil Vecchione, and Christine Zak of Encoded Designs fame, and then John and I had a follow-up afterwards. We're looking at right after the first of the year, so January 2018 is when we're going to kick that Kickstarter off. We're using the intervening time to make sure we've got some really good artists lined up. We've got all of our book production steps and processes ironed out, lined out, so that we know just what the hell we're doing. Last thing I want to do is be the guy who's bitched about Kickstarters I can't produce and then not be able to produce on my own fucking Kickstarter. So anyway, it's just the perfect time for us to make sure we have things lined up and some really cool art and just trying to make the book the best we possibly can. So more details once I know the exact dates, but it is still in process, and I had a really good time working with John Arcadian, just talking about art and stylistically what it needs to look like and so on. So that was a lot of fun. First time I've done that type of thing in the past before, so that was a lot of fun. Forrest, what were you telling? You were babbling about something coming down. What do you got going, man?
Yeah, well, as if we don't have enough conventions going on. We've got GaryCon coming up in the spring. It's never too early to prepare for that. Event registration's open. I'm going to be running a couple things. Are you guys planning on running anything there? Do you know yet?
The last couple years I've been to GaryCon, I have not run. After coming off of Gamehole and then running EverCon, GaryCon has been like my relax hangout con where I just get to like see you at the bar, get a drink or a soda or dinner with folks and just kind of hang out. However, Dave Beatty had convinced me that I should run a Wraith game at Gamehole Con, and then poor Mr. Beatty got shafted at the firehouse where he works and shift changes, so he can't make it. So I'm thinking I'm going to run a Wraith game down at GaryCon. This will be GaryCon 10, so it'll be a big damn event anyway, so it'll be cool.
Yeah, it'll be a big deal.
Sean, you're going.
I haven't decided whether, I'm going to go. I haven't decided what I'm going to run if I run. Have I run at GaryCon? Trying to think if I have.
Haven't seen you run anything there.
I didn't last year, and the year before, I don't know. I can't remember if I have. Honestly.
Well, you can make up for it.
Yeah. Plenty of time, right?
But yeah, GaryCon is a heck of a good convention too, just from the what do I want to say, kind of the meet and greet, the really friendly atmosphere of it all. I mean, that's how I had met Forrest before at Gamehole Con, but at GaryCon was when we had plenty of downtime, and he and I had a chance to just shoot the shit for hours on end about gaming and just random stuff. So that's the type of thing that I look forward to at GaryCon. That's always a lot of fun.
It's also the notorious place for Happy Salmon, for disturbing other people. With the game of Happy Salmon, right? That turned into pretty much like a small-scale riot.
Yeah, that was... Yeah, when Doug Kovacs looked over and he was just about ready to start knifing people, that was about time for us to...
He was stomping around on the ground and screaming, literally. So just kind of mocking us, but hey, that's all right. Doug, he'll get over
it. That was fun.
Yeah, he wasn't very happy. GaryCon is March 8th to the 11th, 2018 in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
Beautiful venue, by the way.
It is.
The old Playboy Club.
The old Playboy Club, yeah. Yeah, it's gorgeous down there.
Right.
All right, shall we random encounter it up?
We should random encounter. Oh my God, where's random encounter? Random encounter. Fielding emails, voicemails, comments from social media, comments on 157, not 158. Brett, you want to start out with Tony?
Yeah, Tony Sugarloaf Baker, patron of the show. He writes in and says, you guys did a great job with this topic. Holy crap. I haven't heard that in a while. That was really nice. Thank you, Tony. I think there's often a misconception that all the work for a good time falls on the GM. Well, there's a lot of work for the GMs running the game. They do not hold responsibility for everyone's good time. The players need to express themselves clearly and concisely and take ownership of their own fun. It is a group social activity, and good communication is a requirement. I've seen many game sessions and sometimes campaigns fall apart because of poor communication. It is important for players to repeat themselves if they don't think they're being heard, and repeat themselves in a different way if they don't think they're being understood. And in the reverse, the GM and fellow players should watch for players to show signs of frustration and address them as soon as possible. You know, I agree with that. One of the things I have found, my games became better when I was reading the social cues instead of saying, boy, Forrest over there seems frustrated. If he is, he'll speak up. It's become a hell of a lot easier to say, Forrest, what are you thinking, man? And have him say, well, I'm really angry right now, or I really don't like this, or I don't understand the point. I've never had Forrest in a game to yell at me like that, but I would
eventually.
I would much rather directly, when you see those social cues, ask. And even as a player, I've done that many times to prod other people at the table to get them talking about stuff as opposed to brooding or being disengaged. So that's a good point. I think Tony's got some good stuff there. And of course, Sean, that holds right on to your standard line, is that players are slack-ass bastards, and it's not just the game master's job to entertain them.
I think that would be summing it up rather nicely, Brett. We haven't heard from Tony for a while. Hey, Tony, thanks for letting us know you're alive, buddy.
Absolutely. Sean, you can have the next one.
All right. Blake Ryan writes, good day, fellas. Glad to hear Sean is doing well. Soon he can stop Brett from hiding in a tree and teach him to hunt. Kidding. Regarding wear and tear on armor, D&D. If characters don't need to repair gear after encounters with gelatinous cubes and rust monsters, then you are being way too easy on them. In the original version of Dark Sun, the bone and wood weapons had breakage chance since they were less durable than metal, and armor was in pieces because metal was rare, but upgrading armor was important. One option to invert the magical equals indestructible trope is a curse on the land that suddenly makes the magic decay the items instead of enhance them. Great way to level the playing field, like the end of Escape from LA. In most D&D and Shadowrun games, you don't have to worry about maintaining weapons and armor much because you are constantly upgrading your gear after every other mission. People refer to movies for never-ending ammo, but a good example is the movie Heat. Every gunfight they change ammo. It's part of the tension. So fumbles in gunfights can be gun jams, barrels overheating, or clips running out. Every fumble does not have to be friendly fire. Love the show. Keep it up.
I think as you know, as usual, when our listeners are write in and take the time to tell us stuff, Blake's got good points, right? You know, when what we talked about last show, you know, just having different things happen to gear and wear it down, and sometimes the magical equals indestructible trope, if you do invert it, as you talked about, that's an interesting way to go as well. But just kind of making that stuff seem a little more important. And I do love the idea of, and I've had that many times with, you know, fails or, what do I want to say, fumbles or whatever, you know, barrels overheat, guns jam, clips run out, you reach back for that last arrow, but your quiver's empty. Well, you know, all that stuff is, I think that's good. Or even had fumbles where, you know, the straps in your armor crack or something along those lines. All that stuff can play. So that's good. I like it. All right. What do we got next? Crimfan. Crimfan says, your theme song should be I've Got You by Sonny and Cher. Oh, thanks, Crimfan. Obviously, charged magic items like magic ammo wear out, and I used to do a weapon broken on a fumble as an option too. But now I can say I play tabletop games that have equipment wear and tear as a default part of the game, although I'm sure there are some ultra-realistic fantasy heartbreakers that have it. Oh, but I cannot say I've played those games. He's saying he hasn't played one. He's sure there are some ultra-realistic ones that do have it. He continues to say, part of it may be the annoyance level of relevant bookkeeping. It's not at all uncommon in CPRGs, though, where the computer is handling the bookkeeping for you. Fallout had equipment damage, for instance, at least in Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4. It would have to work like this kind of thing in a game that was designed to have a gritty setting. I could see it in a game like Cubicle 7's Adventures of Middle-earth, or some other low fantasy setting where the challenge of the environment is as important a part of the game as the challenge of combat. There's even a precedent in the Middle-earth source material. Thorin Oakenshield's epithet comes from having a shield broken at the Battle of, oh, good God, Azan Ulblizar, I think, yes. I'll go with that. At which point, I can never do those. Anyway, at which point he picked up a club, a piece of oak to replace it, which is very true. So yeah, I think and this is, Forrest, I'm glad you're here. Forrest also does the Glowburn podcast, knows a bit about, say, Gamma World, post-apocalyptic. Forrest, in those game systems, which you have played a hell of a lot more and pay much more attention to than Sean or I do, how do they deal with equipment damage and such?
Well, there's not necessarily something on equipment damage unless you fumble. For like Mutant Crawl Classics, you can have a gun fall apart. In fact, as I recall, one of the first times I ran that, Wayne Humphrey shot the character that had your name.
Oh,
no, it was
yeah,
his daughter.
right.
His daughter.
Bretsky.
It was his daughter shot Bretsky,
Yeah.
and then the gun fell
Bretsky.
apart in her hands right then and there. So it was like dead and gone. But usually it's when you're rolling to determine the condition of the items ahead of time that you have those planted. So of course, the difficult part is keeping track of all of it, right? You know, you've got 10 bullets and 3 of them are bad. When do the bad ones come up? And there are different mechanics to take care of that. But really, any post-apocalyptic game, most post-apocalyptic games are going to have some kind of a mechanic where you're going to have failures, you're going to have duds, you're going to have, you know, the weapon you're using, the armor you're using is just plain not going to operate. And that's a pre-existing condition. That's not something that happens over time with wear and tear. However, Reed Sanfilippo is doing the American Survival Guide for Crawling Under a Broken Moon, DCC. And
Okay.
he has a new armor. I was just looking at it last night, actually. He has a new armor methodology where oh boy, I don't want to take all the time to explain it, but essentially you have some ablative armor. You could, you want to do the Mad Max thing and throw hockey pucks on your elbows to make you safe.
Yeah.
Well, that's only going to last one time, right? They're going to get knocked off, and then there goes your armor, and so your elbows are exposed at that point. So he has a full system for it. That's it's really intriguing, and I'm really curious to see how it plays out. We'll be at Gamehole when I'm running. We'll be using that system, so it should be fun. But it's built into that.
I think the as Crimfan points out, the relevant bookkeeping, right? That's the thing that generally keeps me. And Sean and I talked about this last episode too, but it generally keeps folks from going too crazy because it's just more fucking numbers to track and whatever. But if there is a better, more creative way to do it, it's great when you can have a computer game do it for you. Obviously, you've got AI or whatever running in the background takes care of all that shit.
Another way to do it is if you have a luck mechanic, you just check your luck. And if you roll unlucky, your armor falls apart or your sword breaks or whatever. That's an easy way to do it if you have a luck mechanic.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yes, that could be easy. Then just making sure that happens, that is checked on a regular basis. It's not a hard thing to pull through. I like that. Pretty cool. Sean, anything there, man?
No.
All right, so you can have Chris Johnson.
That one. All right. Do we want to go into the guys on Google Plus?
Oh, sure. Yeah, do that.
So we'll go alternate. So Jared Rasher on Google Plus on the same episode says, in a game like D&D 5th edition where you have flaws that you can take, you could turn this around from being the DM's responsibility and make it the player's. The player has a flaw such as can't be bothered with mundane things. It would probably be worth inspiration for that player to voluntarily ruin a perfectly good longsword and waste their first turn of combat realizing that they hadn't taken care of it. In that situation, it's a narrative thing that makes sense in the setting, but it's not something you are tracking with each person. And of course, in more narrative games, you can do this with things like giving yourself the aspect of shit for gear or something and invoking it when you waste a round realizing you can't contribute to the scene because your gear is worthless.
We talked about it last time, and I really like the narrative approach, sometimes more than a raw mechanical approach, but the narrative / luck mechanic thing that Forrest just mentioned is cool too. Plus these aspect types of things bring some mechanical component to the game, but also really help force the descriptive narrative component of it. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Jim Fitzpatrick chimed in and said the Black Hack has depletion dice for gear like torches and arrows, and it does. Jim, I should have totally remembered that. I have the Black Hack. It's a really cool game. It starts at, say, a D10, and every time you use the thing, you roll the die. If you roll a 1, the die reduces to the next die down. If you're at a D4 and roll a 1, too bad. You could totally do that with weapons and armors, too. Roll it once a day. I thought about writing a program to see how long gear would last, but it seemed like a lot of work. Extra shitty day. Roll it twice. Easy day on the caravan where you have no encounters. Skip a day. Yeah, it's bookkeeping, but it creates dramatic moments. Sorry if you answered this the last 18 minutes of the episode, but couldn't bother with waiting until the end. Jared Rasher says he loves the idea of making it an aspect out of it. I take out my bow and shoot the dragon. Not with those arrows, you don't. Tosses over a fate point. It's like the inverse aspect of Kender Pockets. I like that.
Roger Braslett, I've long had an unused idea for a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay that armor could withstand an amount of damage equal to its cost in gold pieces before the armor was unusable. You can get it repaired at any time if you have the money and the availability of an armorer.
That would totally fit with the Warhammer milieu, right? Where it's that grim, dark, everything sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It totally fits there. Let's see here. John Henry not only was also going to mention the Black Hack, but he says also of note is how Dungeon World handles ammunition in the volley move and how the GM can generally run down PC equipment using DM moves. I'm not a huge Dungeon World aficionado, but that does make sense based on the few times I have been able to play it.
Michael P. on those tricky ammo rules. I remember that the recent Gamma World, the one that used 4th edition rules, had a binary system. You had ammo or you didn't have ammo. You could fire once in an encounter and still have ammo after the encounter. If you fired more than once, you might as well keep firing because you'd be out of ammo after the encounter. Also, ammo was considered generic. If you found quote-unquote ammo, you had it for whatever you were armed with.
I cannot recall the last time. I think the last time I played Gamma World was first edition, maybe second, way back then. But I've never played the fourth, so I am not familiar with that. That's an interesting approach.
Never played Gamma World.
All right, and last, Michael Phillips says with regard to VC Young's question, two places he might look are Cypher System and Pathfinder Society. Cypher System lets you spend XP to do things like establish a home or learn a new narrow skill. It would be easy to expand that into a kingdom management system. Permanent effects come from role-playing or resource spends. Pathfinder Society tracks prestige points. I think you get a few of each adventure, and there's a chart of things you can spend them on, including creating a home, getting your body retrieved and resurrected if you die in a mission, buying minor magic items, always a wand of cure light wounds, and a bunch of other things off a list. You could certainly expand that list to include the insert options into a hex crawl options. Interesting. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So the last bit was Chris Johnson, who posed the question quite a while ago, and we haven't brought it up. So he says, "Hey guys, first off, Sean, I was very sorry to hear about your accident. Thank you. Glad to hear you and your wife are on the mend and you are back in action." So thank you so much, Chris, for the sentiments. I have recently been hearing a lot about West March's campaigns. In fact, a GM in a Facebook group I'm in recently set up a Star Wars game, Edge of the Empire, in this style, which was the first I'd heard about it. And then another podcast I occasionally listen to did a whole series on the topic. I'd like to know your thoughts on this campaign style and would like to know if you've ever run one. What would be your tips for putting one together? I hope you'll do a show on the topic. Thanks, guys. Chris, not a guy, Johnson.
Matt Colville has a really good YouTube video on the West Marches style campaign. So I've heard there's stuff about it that is very similar to things I've done in the past as well. I think it would definitely be worth a show to talk about it because it's a different type of approach to a campaign that once I heard it defined and described by Colville and a couple other folks, it seems to make sense from I don't know if we have time to play this week or I can't get the whole group together. It seems like a really good tool/mechanism to help keep a campaign going, even when you have limited or alternate types of turnout for a game session. So I think it'll definitely go on the list, Chris. I'm going to throw it on the list, and we'll see what we can do to hit it.
Cool. All right. Let's get into the main topic.
Let's do it.
Wow, that was really flippin' loud. It won't be when they listen to it, but God, blasted all my ears. Anyways,
all right. So
Brett touched a little bit on the topic. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I was gonna say this topic is all forced to Gary's fault. That's why we got him here so he can speak directly to us. But his question came to us over Twitter. He said, what's the difference between writing and running an adventure? Forrest has written adventures before for publication, and I'm starting to do some of that for the for the Avalon setting that I'm going to do, as I mentioned before, with a Kickstarter. I have my Iron Shoes adventure and a couple other things I'm working on, and I don't. There's always that thing where I've run the pre-written adventure, and you pull it together, you run it, and as they say, right, no adventure survives first contact with the players, but. And then you will hear people say, "Hey, I'm writing an adventure." And my first thought is, "Oh, you're going to publish it?" They're like, No. Everybody, it feels like, is using the term writing as opposed to designing. When I was a kid, if you were setting up an adventure for your friends to go through, you were either building or designing a thing. You weren't writing. Writing was always referred to, or at least in my group, writing was a reference to a novelist or a short story person. If you were building an adventure, it was a much more mechanical feeling, like you were a laborer or some master craftsman who was building this thing. So anyway, let's kind of crack into this thing. So Forrest, from your perspective, what does it mean to you when somebody says they're going to write an adventure? If I say, "Hey, I'm writing an adventure," do you immediately think publication, personal use? How do you what does that evoke in your brain?
I do jump to the publication right there, right off the bat. And I guess the reason is mostly because of context, because when I've heard people mention this in the past, it's often a person saying, I really want to write an adventure, but I don't know if I have the writing chops. I don't know if I can do it. It's kind of a general lack of confidence, I guess. And so there's this in the context of the conversations I've had, it's been people wanting to write for publication. The internet makes that a lot easier now. And there are plenty of publication platforms out there. So it's available to way more people than it used to be. Back when I started in 1979, man, you had to go to your local toy or hobby shop or bookstore to find anything. And nobody else was really publishing things because it cost too much money.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't a hard print, it didn't exist, right? There was no such thing as electronic copies of things.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, who could afford a copy? I mean, people were doing the blue ink photostat back then. Nobody could even afford a copier. So that's changed pretty dramatically, obviously. And I think, in the context of today, when I hear somebody say they want to write an adventure, that's what I think of.
Sean, when you hear that, if someone's writing an adventure, do you get the same thing that Sean does, or how does it hit you?
You mean the same as Forrest does?
Yes. Did I say? Oh God, what am I saying? Anyway, Forrest. Yes. Jesus. All right.
Somewhat. Most of the times when I hear somebody wanting to write an adventure, I don't assume that they're looking to publish it. Like, I think when they're writing an adventure, they're just writing something for their home group.
Okay.
But that's just my only assumption, right? It's not because they're conveying it in a particular manner. I just go, oh, okay, cool. What are you doing on homebrew? Oh, that's awesome. Cool. But some may stipulate I'm writing an adventure to publish, or I may ask them, oh, are you publishing that? Are you putting it out on the guild or what? And then it kind of goes from there.
Well, I think there's also a lot of writing out there that's been written for personal use that will never see the light of day publishing wise.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. But it may be as high quality or higher quality than some things that are published.
I would not doubt it.
No, seriously,
it's true.
It's kind. I'm not going to say it's a moot point, but I guess the whether you're intentionally writing for a publication or just writing for your home group kind of informs the way that, at least the way I write. Because when I'm writing for personal use, I've got a lot more, I know my own brain, I know my own players, so I have a lot more leeway. I don't have to be as explicit about things as writing for publication. Does that make sense?
That totally does. I think one of the pieces that I have found is that people who, even if you are freeform, ad hoc, off the cuff game master, which I tend to be, you still know you still know what you like. And if I pick up an adventure and I say, wow, this thing's on fucking rails, there's no way I can really do this without beating the hell out of it. It may not necessarily be for me, or I'm going to just GM over the top of this fucker and make it work. You still know, no matter how you're writing, designing, whatever you're doing for your home group, it gives you a basis for what you like. So I would think, or at least my approach is being right now, is that as I'm taking the things I like and I'm making sure to include those components along with the extra bits that I have to, well, at least I feel I need to put into something that will be published to make sure that it's very clear for somebody who's not Brett, right? Mm-hmm. I could make a series of notes that says, oh, this happens, then this, or, bullet point items with just big names and terms that totally evoke something to me. You have to be a little bit more descriptive, because unless you're in my head and you're me, it ain't going to mean shit to you. So yeah, I get what you're saying, Forrest, where you've got to take it. And if it's going to be for publication, there needs to be more to it, right? Just so that the person understands just what the hell you mean when you say whatever it is you're saying.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, you said earlier, no adventure survives first contact with the players. That's very true. But also, no written published adventure survives first contact with the reader. I mean, I can't think the last time I ran. I think maybe the first time I ran what's a B2, the early module that came with the red box. Keep on the Borderlands.
Yes.
That's probably the last time that I actually ran an adventure as written. That was like 1980. So since then, I pretty much, I'll run another module. I've run lots of modules because they're convenient and handy and easier to prepare for. But I almost always tweak it. And partly because there's expectations. If you've read Tomb of Horrors and you know everything in it, going through Tomb of Horrors is not nearly as horrible. Right.
No. Then it just becomes, oh fuck, one more time.
Right. But if the person running it has tweaked it just a little tiny bit here and there, then it throws people into fits, which is just hilarious. I get a kick out of it anyway.
No, I had a group of guys I was playing with. My buddy Lenny had changed up Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil. He had modified it a little bit because he looked at the one vampire, anti-paladin, ass-kicking Thrommel guy and went, holy shit, he's basically a monster in a room. He went, he's like Monty, because Monty Cook wrote it. Yep. And he's like, man, you left too much on the table there. So he took it and ran with it. And we had a couple of players in the group who were pissed at that because they're like, well, we didn't beat the module, or we could have beat the module, but you made it so we couldn't. Or people get cranky about that, so, as you say. I do think, though, what you just said there is no adventure survives first contact with the reader is interesting because, Sean, have you had this where you've read something and you're like, oh, this is how this adventure plays, and you've talked to somebody else who has also played it, and then they took it somewhere totally different just from a misunderstanding or different interpretation of what they read?
Yeah, that's not uncommon. I don't think when you talk to folks that have run, it's interesting when you take a pre-published adventure that becomes popular. So say the Tomb of Annihilation is out now for 5e from WotC.
Yep.
And it's getting, I'm sure, there's players on Twitch that are running it. There's home games that are running it. And then you get to a con and you're like, oh, what are you running? Or even people that we've interacted with on Twitter and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you playing? And they're like, oh, playing 5e. Oh, are you running? Yes. What are you running? Tomb of Annihilation. And then once the conversation starts, it's like, oh, okay. Well, how, what's going on, or how far are you? And then they'll state, yeah, my players went to here and then they didn't want to go to this place. So what I had to do is, X or Y. So it's almost like whenever us in the industry as game masters run an adventure, every time we run it for a different group, it's never quite exactly the same. And then comparing those notes always seems to be interesting. I love hearing about it because I could kind of take a mental note and go, oh, that's pretty freaking cool. I would want to do that even if my players don't go down that path.
That's right. I like that. Yeah. And I think the other thing that what you're saying there is also really important is that if you're writing an adventure, it feels to me like especially if it's for publication, is that being that it's open to interpretation is fine. If you can stick, and Forrest will correct me if I'm way crazy here, but if you have certain themes or feels or whatever that you want, but it's going to be open to interpretation. It won't survive contact with the players or the reader. And that's fine. Accept that. Don't believe that you're creating this thing that will be followed line by line or, train stop by train stop. Let it, let it do its thing. I think if you can write with that end in mind, you'll probably end up with a better reading and better playable adventure. Forrest, what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's funny. Somebody on Twitter just the other day, just a couple days ago, I was looking and they had mentioned, they said something like, I've talked to dozens and dozens of GMs across all different systems and so on and so forth. And the number one thing that I find with everybody who I talk to, the number one skill that a DM has to master is being able to fly by the seat of the pants. That's the number one thing that you can develop as a game master to be a better game master. And I think that's true because, yeah, attention spans are short, right?
Yes,
people are going to do what they want to do, and they should, because they're playing a character, and that character may make decisions that would run counter to anything that the original writer of the adventure thought would happen. Am I confusing everybody yet?
No, that totally makes sense, and that actually brings up a thought in my head. I'm going to jump on you here for a second, Forrest.
Mhm.
When you write, do you think of do you ever do pre-gen characters, or is that something you don't even think of?
Well, okay. When I'm writing an adventure, okay. Well, let me go back to Beyond the Silver Screen because that's an easy one. That one I did up. It's for DCC, for Dungeon Crawl Classics, and they have an occupation chart in the book, in the DCC book. Well, this was an adventure set starting in the late 70s, early 80s, with a bunch of teenagers, and so I had to change the occupation charts to match that. Right.
Mhm.
So you're not going to be a gong farmer. You're going to be a pizza delivery guy or whatever, your newspaper deliverer, whatever. And so in that way, there weren't pre-gen characters, but I kind of closed the scope of the pre-gen, or the scope of the generation of characters, if you will.
Got
So here's the milieu. So yeah, in that way, I guess you could say I was forcing a pre-gen, sort of, but not really.
Because when I read some of the you read some of the adventures, I'll have like, oh, there's a bunch of pre-gens in the back.
Mhm.
If that's done right, you look at those pre-gens and go, wow, I totally see why these 5 or 4 or 8 or however many there are all fit this particular adventure.
Yeah,
And-
and the part of the thing there, I think, at least with D&D in particular, is a lot of those modules were written as tournament modules, so they had
Yeah, some of the
pre-gen
early- a lot of the
tournament
early-
characters.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, these are the characters that, whatever, Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson or whoever rolled up for this adventure and probably handed out the character sheets. So they were specifically meant for that.
And I think if you're going to write an adventure and I don't mind having the writer, the author of the adventure, whatever it is, telling me, hey, it would be really helpful. And I remember seeing this in the old modules from TSR and stuff saying, hey, this is for X number to X to Y number of player characters, levels this through this. It's oftentimes we tell you at the beginning, hey, look, it'd be really helpful if you had at least one from every major class, a thief, a fighter,
Yeah.
a cleric, a wizard, right? If you have that, you're fine. Maybe a paladin, but if you do, they would often give you these little crib pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And 99 times 100, I completely fucking ignored it. and my players did whatever they wanted to anyway. But I think those little notes on the side, I think honestly, as readers and consumers of game material now, I think especially those of us who've been around for a while are much more savvy about that stuff. And if we read that, we're like, oh, Forrest and Brett wrote this module, and one of the things that they put in there was, hey, it would really be helpful if you had X type of PCs because they fit really well, or nothing that has, no ASMRs, please, because it doesn't fit the setting.
Or
So
you're
I
going
think-
to need a cleric.
Yeah, exactly.
You need a healer in your group somewhere, or else.
So I think sometimes just having those, this kind of goes back to Sean runs a lot more, or has run more of the published adventures of the more modern design more recent publication than I have. And when I picked up some of the ones he's talked about, a lot of them seem to have the very explicit to the game master, like, look, if you do X, Y, and Z, this will help you make this better. If you don't do these things, you may have to make some tweaks, buyer beware. And I think that type of thing is very helpful. And I think that it's probably from just directly addressing the reader saying, look, here, man or woman or whomever, you're going to be reading this as the game master. Take these things into account so that when you run it, you can get the most out of it. It seems to make sense to me to do that. Do you agree, Forrest, or what do you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think part of that, part of that has to do with what kind of adventure you are writing. And by that, I mean, are you writing something that's supposed to fit into a long-term campaign, a home campaign of somebody's? Or are you writing something that's going to be at a convention you have exactly 4 hours to start and finish? Because with 4 hours to start and finish, you better have pre-gens. Unless your whole intent is just to roll up characters. And I think of the Call of Cthulhu comes to mind really immediately when I think of this sort of thing. They oftentimes in their adventures, they will have specific, these are your characters. These are the 5-6 characters. Pick one and go with it. Because they need to have a certain skill set in order to succeed. Whereas if you're looking at some of their campaign pieces, especially the older ones for Call of Cthulhu, it's open. It's wide open. I mean, the NPCs are all set, of course, but for player characters, they might, like you said, they might suggest, well, you probably want to have somebody with the library use skill, or, you want to have somebody who can shoot a gun.
Yeah, a lot of those Call of Cthulhu campaign ones were basically reminding you, hey, this is a game about investigation and reading books. So if you have somebody who doesn't, if you don't have anybody in there who knows archaic languages, can't use a library, and doesn't know how to shoot a gun, think again.
Right. No, I haven't looked at, I have Trail of Cthulhu, but I haven't looked at, actually I've got Bookhounds of London that I've been reading through slowly. But I haven't looked at any of the adventures for Trail of Cthulhu to know if they do the same thing or not. If they put in there, here are the characters. Use these ones. Do you know, Brett?
Yes, the one I have, I can't remember the name of it, but it has birds. And I ran it for Sean and the crew there. Kevin and Wayne were in that one too. But they did have PCs, and what I did was I let the guys make characters, but I forced a connection to a certain place and time, which helped make everybody glue together a little bit more. Hey, Sean,
sure.
when you're reading pre-gen modules and such, do you like having pre-gens, and if so, why? And what do you think about the whole overtly telling the game master, hey, here's some boundaries you should keep in mind? Does that make sense to you, or do you think that's almost too railroad even for you?
Yeah, it's unless it's a con game, I could see pre-gens. But if you're doing more of a campaign, or maybe even a home game, if you're going to do a one shot, if it's a one shot, sure, pre-gens I think is certainly fine. If you have an adventure that's going to be based around, and you want to make sure that the characters that are in your, I guess, proposed story or proposed kind of outline can get through it in a manner that has those characters in mind. But I would say that if it was something outside of the one shot, then people are going to want to play their own characters, but then you have to adapt the adventure to consider that the group is not going to have the brainiac, or not going to have the muscle, or whatever, elements is going to be thought of. You have to kind of account for it. Kind of like, in Gumshoe, where it's like, well, they're going to get a clue, but how are they going to get it? Are they going to get it so if they use this skill, they'll get it. If they use that skill, they'll get it. That way it kind of covers 2 or 3 people potentially. That they're still going to uncover it, and depending on how many points. So maybe it's typically, if it's the person with the intelligence kind of trait, they may not have to spend as many points, but if, there's a trade-off in the economy thing.
No, I get it.
So one thing that dawns on me is that with one shots, you can actually build the adventure around the characters. You do the pre-gens, build it around there. I did that with what I ran at GaryCon last year. I ran Gamma World First Edition. And what I used there as an adventure actually is, speaking of publication, I just finished my first draft of Killer of Giants. It's a module for Crawling Under Broken Moon. And the Gamma World thing I ran last year at GaryCon was a predecessor to that. And in that one, I decided first and foremost, I wanted the party to be all hoops, which are mutant rabbits, right? And so I built the adventure around the fact that these are going to be mutant rabbits, and one of their abilities is if they touch a piece of metal, a meter-long piece of metal, they can turn it to rubber. It's like, Bugs Bunny touching Elmer Fudd's gun kind of thing.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought, they're going to a very high-tech environment, lots of robots, androids, so on and so forth. They're armed with spears. That's it. Right. And everybody else has got laser guns, or slug throwers or whatever. How do you, and that was kind of the whole shtick, was how can these guys with this one really cool ability use their brains and use the situation that they're in and use their mutation to effectively make it through here without having all the guns and all the hardware. And so I actually built the adventure around that idea. And so, certain puzzles, they had to use this mutation. If they didn't think to use the mutation, they didn't make it through the puzzle. So we'd have to go a circuitous route to get to their goal.
I like the idea, and I think what you said there makes a lot of sense to me. And Sean and I were talking about this when he was doing a Star Wars game at the one Gamehole Con. We're talking about the types of characters to put into the one shot. And I honestly believe if you are going to write a one shot and you are going to have pre-gen characters, I think, especially if you, even if you're not going to publish it, I think a very similar theme there is it should be about those characters. It should fit them completely. So when you have a God knows who you're bringing to the show type of character setup versus these are the 5-player characters that are included in this one shot. It's a convention game. Here, take these and go with them. Every one of those characters should have very specific hooks and desires and needs and stuff that keeps them either together, at odds with each other, whatever the theme of it is, but also be integral to the adventure itself. You shouldn't have anybody sitting there saying, well, I don't know why I have a doctor in this thing because it's all gunfights. Right. That shouldn't be. So I think from a writing perspective, both publication and personal use at a one-shot type of scenario, I believe it's imperative that the characters for one shot are very tied into the adventure that's going to happen for them. There should be a damn good reason why they're there, and they should all have plenty of opportunity for spotlight because the encounter's built for them, you know?
Right.
Agreed.
So let me think about this. So when we talked about this kind of in broader terms for us when it comes to, making sure that we're more overt or direct at the game master, whoever's reading the adventure itself. When you were like Beyond the Silver Scream, when you're just the one you're just talking about, the giant one, and so forth, when you are making sure that the game master gets it and that they have all the right stuff, are there certain key pieces that you think of that says, hey, normally for myself it'd be a bullet point that says giant with big club. Do you make sure that what are you looking to blow out? You know what I'm saying? What are you looking to add more? Because I'm not Forrest or Gary. I don't know what you're thinking. I'm not in your head. How do you make sure that what's in your head is on the paper in the right places? Because we've all read that module where it's just been like some author's brain vomit of way too much shit. How do you distill, and what do you think is the most critical chunks to pull in?
Yeah, it's an interesting balancing act because you have you want to get your atmosphere across, right? I mean, that's kind of key. I think in any games I've played, if the game doesn't have a compelling atmosphere, I don't want to be in it. I just have no desire.
Yeah.
But you don't want that to overwhelm the reader to the point where they can't pick out the details they need to relate to the players. So it's actually, I will posit that writing games for publication is actually really hard work. Because like you said, you don't want to just vomit all your frou-frou atmosphere stuff all over, but you want to have enough that you can paint a picture. But on the other hand, you have to have the mechanics be very clear. Really the majority of my time on writing those, like with Killer of Giants, for example, was spent on purely mechanical things. That's the hard work of writing for publication, because you have to make it perfectly clear to a reader who you're not going to be in the same room reading this to them and explaining it to them, right? Mm-hmm. They have to be able to just look at the paper and know, and that's not easy.
So when you say mechanical components of it, let me ask you this. So oftentimes, at least when I've been writing like with Iron Shoes, I wrote a different Avalon adventure a while back. I would reference make a drowning check or make an X check or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Or are you talking about, or perhaps you're in addition to scenario specific mechanics that you have designed for that adventure?
Yeah, I'm talking more scenario specific design. I'll give you an example. So in Beyond the Silver Scream, spoiler, there is a certain point where time becomes screwy, and it's random. It's random for each character. So you pass beyond this certain area, and it's randomly determined what speed your character is doing things at. And so that screws around with initiative, it screws around with combat, it screws around with movement, and you have to pay really careful attention to it. So I had to make sure that I was very explicit in how that operated. So to try to make it as easy as possible, because I knew it was going to be chaotic. That's the whole point. It's like a Temple of Chaos type thing. But I wanted to be able to make it clear enough that that anybody reading it could understand, okay, this is how I do this. This is how I keep track of this without making it so burdensome. And for me, the real test was when I ran the module. I ran it for playtesting earlier, but I had a kind of a after it was published. I don't want to call it a playtest again because playtesting was over, but I really kind of put it to the test, I suppose, at Gamehole. And I'd set it aside intentionally for a couple of months, and then I picked it up and I was like, okay, can I run this mechanic reading my own writing, right? I wrote this. Can I do this and do it effectively? And yeah, I could. I mean, it turned out just fine and people had a great time. But that's kind of the test. It's that playtesting, in my opinion, that's really where the rubber hits the road. Does this work in real life? Because you can write all day long, but if you don't test it, you don't know if it's going to work, and you don't want to be publishing a product and selling it and having people pay you money for it and then realize that your mechanics don't work.
I think that works. I mean, doubly so for a mechanic that you create yourself. If you create a mechanic to handle a very specific piece, but I would not shortchange it either when it comes to even just standard mechanics, right? If like, hey, this is a good place for a swim check. This is a good place for this or that. And you do something as wonky as saying in a difficulty class environment or whatever it is, saying, well, this is a DC 5 or a DC 25, or you apply either a too easy or too difficult of a difficulty check, or you do something where you set the difficulty rating wonky, right? Like, it's a -5 on the roll when you're like, fucking hell, -5, man. No one's ever going to get this.
Right.
It's one of those pieces where, especially as we've learned over the years, is that you'd never have a skill check that has the ability to stop the adventure cold, especially in a one-shot. You really don't want to do that. Right. I know there are some people who totally groove on that. Like, look, you failed your skill check. You don't know. Cthulhu eats the world. And everything went pear-shaped. Y'all fucking die. I know I've got players of mine who totally groove on that. But generally speaking, most people do not want to, especially a convention game or even at a home game, say, well, you failed this difficulty check. Everybody falls off the bridge and falls in the lava and everybody dies. Now, granted, some groups dig on the TPK feeling of it, but by playtesting it, you get to find out, is that TPK event incongruous to the rest of the adventure, which is not built with that old school, too fucking bad, you can't roll, you all die perspective. Did have a different vibe, and all of a sudden, bam, smash cut to death. That can be really heavy to drop on people, even if you're not using a specialty rule, right? Just using the regular rules of the game, making sure that you've implemented them properly, because to your point, Forrest, someone's going to read the words you wrote and then try to use them as they're written. I mean, we have to assume they're going to try it as written, and we have to at least be able to say, yeah, it normally works, and wow, it does suck that your group couldn't roll above a 2 all night. Sorry about that, brother.
Yeah, another thing, hold on, I just totally blanked out on my thought. It was a good one, too. When I think about rules, from a rule book, the other thing is you have to understand the familiarity that the players and the DM are going to have with that rule set. And the reason I bring that up is, like with Killer of Giants, Reed has created. It's not a brand new rule set. He's been publishing through Crawling Under a Broken Moon for a while now, but with the Kickstarter, with the it's called the American Survival Guide. There are some new rules, the armor rule I mentioned earlier in the show. And I have to, as I'm writing that, I'm kind of kibitzing with Reed and asking, okay, so here's this new armor rule. How much in depth do you want me to go into this in the module? Because the module is going to come out with the actual rule book, right? Simultaneous release. And so people are not going to be familiar with the rules because they aren't there yet. So, it's something that I struggle with, and I don't have a good answer. Do I explicitly repeat and call out the rules again in the module, or do I just say there's rule X, refer to the book? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Reference the swim thing. Yeah, okay.
Right. I don't have a good answer for that one. And so I kind of go back and forth, and I think Reed and I are both kind of struggling with this right now, actually.
So, Sean, let me throw this at you, man. When you're reading through a pre-published adventure or whatever, I know what my preference is. Do you have a preference as to whether or not the rules are called out as to how they work in the adventure text, or do you prefer them to reference back to the core book?
It'd be nice if everything was in one spot, but that's why they get you to buy the main books typically. All right. I mean, hey, you need the following books or rule books to play this adventure, and then of course, in third party you can't really help it because the third party doesn't have, the ability to reference. Well, that may be debatable too if the rules are, open gaming license and they're all on the internet, but at the same time, I'm sure they don't want to tread on anybody.
Yep.
Write up an adventure and then get into trouble because they're putting material in there that they shouldn't be, and they have to reference the rule books, and that's how you get people to buy the rule books. But I do. So the short answer, goddammit, Brett, is that I want it all in one spot so that I could just say, oh, it's drowning or they're crossing the river and they, here's the DC if they fail or whatever the check is. And they fail, these are the repercussions, whether it's a table or just short verbiage. Yeah, well, nobody wants to open a book, a second book and reference it or whatever.
Well, that's kind of the downfall of D&D second edition, wasn't it? AD&D, because you had all those splat books. I mean, there were a million of them.
Yeah, I mean, well,
even for collectors, but if you're actually going to play the game and you have to go and reference 3 other books to figure out what your character is capable of doing, that got tedious. People were just like, I'm done.
3035 riffs, GURPS. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a host of them. I mean, so many game systems suffered splatbook hell. But you're absolutely right, and I'm with you, Sean. My preference is that as many of the rules as possible are called out. The one thing that I don't mind it if the rules get a little shorter shrift. What I cannot stand is when the bad guys, the monsters, don't have their stats in the adventure itself. That drives me bananas. I never want to have to go back and look up a skeleton from the monster manual. I want it in the fucking adventure.
People do that? I haven't seen that.
I have seen that.
Oh man, that would make me crazy. I'd be writing nasty letters to that author. You got to have it because you got to have it at the table in front of you. I mean, that's the whole function of an adventure, right? It's to have it at the table and to be able to,
I do recall some of the older modules where it'd be like, your wandering monster chart is like 5 giant centipedes, 6 rats, whatever it is, and their stats aren't in there. At least not to my knowledge off the top of my head.
I've seen ones that did have the stats in there for those things. But I don't recall ever seeing one that did. I mean, they probably exist, but boy, I'd be writing nasty letters. Because I don't want to go. I mean, think about it. I pack up my stuff. I drive over to Misty Mountain or my friendly local gaming store, and I'm at the table, right? And I'm playing. It's like, okay, wandering encounter. Somebody rolls that 6. I roll on the chart. I'm like, okay, giant rats. What are the stats?
What the
if I can read my monster manual because I didn't think I needed it, then you make it up as you go. If a good DM will do that, but why put them through that panic?
I cannot recall the adventure itself, and I don't want to blast the author, but it was an older 3035 adventure I purchased off a drive-through ages back, and it referenced monster manual pages and that type of thing. And I think what was trying to happen was they're trying to limit word count or something along those lines, but. If for the love of all that is sacred and holy or unholy, please God, don't do that. That's just that's one of those things that if you're going to have those critters in there, they need to have their stats. And even your random NPCs, sometimes it's not a big deal. Like, there's a grocer, there's a greengrocer. You don't necessarily have to have, Bertha the greengrocer stats, but your key NPCs, somebody who you're pretty sure, especially through playtesting, that the characters have interacted with on a regular basis, or that they've tried to use the city guard as muscle, or they try to get the thief who you initially only thought was supposed to be just a plant for intel, suddenly becomes a hireling. You're like, fuck, okay. It's good to put those types of statistics into the write up as well, just so people understand what the hell they're about. And again, part of the reason for me buying a pre-gen adventure is I want to take some of the prep burden off of me. Yeah, I read it, but I don't have a certain amount of work is done for me. That's why I'm buying it. It takes a load off of me as the game master. So having those rules pieces in there, knowing that it's been play tested accordingly for standard mechanics plus specialty mechanics, it's got the monster stats in it and so forth, that just makes everything a hell of a lot easier for me as a game master. And I'm going to look back and say, hey, the Forest guy writes good shit. I'll buy another one of his because it has all the right things I want in it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, and another beef that I have is we kind of touched on this before, Brett, I think, and it has to do with any module, any paper product, you have to lay it out in a particular manner. So you have layout decisions to make. So going back to just this particular topic with NPCs or monsters in there, there are, say, Paizo's, for example. They do an adventure path. They put a lot of monsters in the back of the adventure, right? So they list it out, and then maybe they have an NPC in there. Maybe they have a brief reference to the monster, but the full stat block may be in the back. And that's kind of part of their layout, as in you're getting an extra monster that may not be in the bestiary. So they kind of put it in what they would maybe consider an appendix for that adventure, which is fine. You got to put it in there. You got to put it in somewhere. Do you put it right next to the encounter that has that monster, or do you put it in the back? You get in an electronic format, and it doesn't matter because it doesn't have to be like page by page, right? Because when you get digital, you could just put hyperlinks in there and you go, oh, it's this monster. You click on the link and it brings up the monster, and then it says back, and then you hit back and it goes back to the text. So I just drives me utterly nuts having to okay, I've got to put a sticky note here and a sticky note here so I can flip back between the two so I can reference all right, what's going on? Okay, now I got the monster in front of me. Okay, now I got to go back to this. Oh, all right, that sounds great. I don't know.
Nothing kills gameplay faster than flipping pages.
No shit.
Seriously.
That is very true. I think that goes to the economy of the writing, right? We touched on that kind of at the beginning, right, Forrest? I mean, if I vomit out everything about the city-state of Avalon, how big it is, how cool it is, and blah, blah, for a con game, at a certain point, somebody buys this and goes, wow, this is really cool, and they got to cut through the first 15 pages to get to the action. The fuck are those 15 pages doing there, right? If you don't need this to get you into the game, it doesn't deserve to be in the book, especially when it comes to an adventure scenario. It just doesn't need to be there.
Oh, I got an idea.
Yeah?
So you have on a tablet or a computer or screen or whatever the app is, and on the left-hand side, you have, say, the encounter details, the room description. You start reading blah, 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 blah. You enter the room, it's 10 by 10, whatever. And then you have the block text. And then after that, you have kind of in this room, the players don't realize it, but this, and this is happening or whatever, right? And then on the right side, you have tabbed, cascaded windows that says monster stats or NPC stats or this NPC. And then you just click each tab on the right-hand side, but the left stays the same. Oh man, somebody market this.
That makes great sense, but that's a whole lot like real work there, getting that set up.
It is.
I wonder if there is a market of just taking old adventures, rewriting them in a format that makes just more sense.
There probably is. Totally could do it. It's just in my copious amounts of spare time. That's what I'll do.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably can do it, but I can't make any money off it.
There's that.
Yeah, it's usually this is not. I guess I was going to say. Last I checked, Forrest has not quit the day job and is now a professional adventure writer.
No, not by any means.
This is not where the big bucks lie, right? So
no, that's and it's been emphasized in other places before, but yeah, if you have the notion that you're going to publish something, especially third party, and make a mint, you're not. Sorry, you're just not.
So the other thing, I don't know why this brings us to mind, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I think the Gamers in General, we have a very high, we have a high expectation of what we think it should be written. This is where the a-hole reviewer comes in. Clearly, these rules have never been play tested. Mr. Blazinski, Mr. Gary obviously don't know what they're talking about here. Mr. Gary doesn't know this. Blah, blah. Some dickhead is out there saying this stuff, right? And I think what sometimes people fail to realize is that a lot of these adventures and so on and so forth are there. It's not always a full-time job. It's something that people are doing. We love the hobby. We're doing the best we can. And I think that constructive criticism would be a hell of a lot more helpful to the author. Like some of the things that Sean just threw out, like, hey, I really like the rules all where you can get them. Maybe it's not feasible for me to do that or the next author to do it, but that is a more helpful piece than saying, clearly you haven't done, that demonstrative, you suck type of feedback. So yeah,
it's easy. It's easy to throw blame. And, I find that those people, they're rare, thankfully, and most of them, their full-time job is playing video games in their mother's basement.
There's a fair number of that. So I guess let me do another bit of a contrast here, and I don't want to drag this out forever, although I'm sure the three of us could keep going all night. But so when you're writing for yourself, I think you don't have to worry so much about feel of the adventure, the tone, the setting, because a lot of that stuff is there. However, I do believe that it would be helpful, even if you're writing an adventure for your own home group, and Sean and I've mentioned this on the show before, is when you're writing even for yourself, if you want to change the tone, if you want to make sure you, like, even using words like very tense or dark and brooding, or just sometimes whatever the cliche phrase is, or even very creative phrase you use, whatever, don't be afraid in your own notes, excuse me, in your own prep, your own writing, to remind yourself of the feel, the tone, and all those pieces of the game that you're trying to get through that session. Because sometimes, depending on what you're doing, the session may change from a very lighthearted romp through the forest where you met these great NPCs, everything was fine, and now you're off to the Dungeon of Eternal Death. And once you've changed and you've gone there from one session to the other, sometimes you need to flip the script a little bit on the tone. And when you're doing that for whatever reason, or if there's components of the tone you want to change, don't be afraid to keep that in your own writing for your own sanity and your own remembrance sake. Because I know it's very important in a published one, but even for yourself privately, don't be afraid to do it. Sorry, Forrest.
But no, that's fine. I was interrupting. Sorry. But in the best published adventures, those are the ones that can do that without overtly doing it. Where it's just the descriptive text. I think of Ravenloft. You know, the descriptive text in the early Ravenloft modules is just so good. It creates the mood without having to say, "Hey, we're trying to create a mood," right? There's certain words that they use. There are certain phrases that they use. There are mental pictures that they paint by the descriptions that they give, and you get the mood. Call of Cthulhu again does that very well. You know, it doesn't have to say you should be scared now, right?
No, that's not.
Right. That doesn't need to be part of it. So the best, the ones that I prefer anyway, the most are the published adventures that can create that mood just with the text that's there, just the descriptive text without having to be calling it out, you know. And that's not an easy skill to learn, to write that way.
No, it's not.
That's a very good point, Forrest, about how much do you put in there? Like, how much do you need to spell everything out versus just let the damn players' minds kind of fill in the blanks, right?
Right.
Does it have to be so descriptive? Or, you know, so there's a trade-off, like how heavy you get into it versus theater of the mind, and let the theater of your mind just fill those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think when you're doing it for yourself, it's very easy to be very direct and blunt, saying, you know, make sure they're scared. It's dark here. You know, it's sunny and happy. Just those are fine. But when you want to turn that into something that you turn over to a public to consume, I sure as hell wouldn't want to pick up a module or an adventure of any kind and read it and say, players should be scared here. I'm like, well, what if they're not?
Exactly.
Give me the things that I can figure it out, as you very adequately said for us, is through the tone, through the writing itself, and the word choices. And this is where it's not just using very direct words, saying, oh, it's very simple. Just go, hey, you know, Chris Nizick, when you're writing this adventure, make sure everyone's scared. Okay, how? And part of it is that's the other trick too, is taking time. I know my group. I know how to scare them. I know my group. I know how to make them giggle. I know how to do this stuff. When you're trying to evoke a thing, it does behoove you to spend time making sure that everybody gets it, what you're trying to evoke through the process. But absolutely, to Sean's point, is the last thing you want is 15 pages of belaborment that are absolutely useless. So you kind of gotta, you know, newspaper Ernest Hemingway it and just hack the shit out of it and get it down to its meaty parts. And the other thing to do, obviously, I mean, Forrest, is copy shit, right? Even if you're not into Call of Cthulhu, you find that really good Call of Cthulhu adventure, read it, understand how they use the wording, and you could follow that same approach for your D&D game or your Star Frontiers game or your Mutant Classics game. Just take the same approach. It's a template, basically.
It's funny when you write like that. It's kind of you're wrestling with a two-headed serpent, because on one hand, you have the mechanics need to be very explicit, and they need to be very clear and logical and kind of cut and dried. But the tone of the setting and the atmosphere should not be mechanical. So it's like I said, writing for publication for adventures, it's not easy. You have to kind of have a multivariant, is that the word I'm looking for? Skill set. It's not, some of it is plain technical writing, but then there's the other side that's the creative side, and you have to be careful not to overblow one or the other.
That's a very good point. Adventure writing, or actually game writing in general, is you don't often have, and not that every computer game has this, but you have somebody who writes the storyline and somebody who writes the code, right? To make sure you can't bump into a wall and that the ogres attack the first person to cast fireball or whatever the hell it is they do. These are smaller press. You're doing it yourself, and you're basically running both sides. Somebody may cross-check your mechanics for you, or make sure that, hey, yeah, that totally works to have this armor rusting, mini game mechanic within this system. Great, good on you. But you're dead right, for us. There's the technical writing. Like, look, here's how you march through this complicated combat. Here's how you deal with the fact that time is gone all, kittywampus fucking crazy here. Versus, it should feel like you're in the back of a, wizard van adventuring through time and space. There's two totally different styles of writing there, and to make the two marry up is an art form. It's not very easy to do.
Yeah, you have to be a little schizophrenic to be a writer for adventures. That's you have to have kind of a split personality in some ways.
That totally makes sense. All right, Sean, you got anything else, man?
No way, man.
All right. I think we've hit this one pretty good. Forrest, thank you very much. We'll go into die roll here, but
thanks for having me on.
This was great, man. No, this is great. I really appreciate the insight and your thoughts on it too. So this
I'm curious for you to revisit that. When you're done with your project, Brett. I want to hear what you have to say. How it turned out and what your experience was like.
Oh, I will. I'll probably be in a corner with a bottle of whiskey complaining about what it feels like.
Catatonic.
I don't know. Exactly. All right.
Let's get into die roll. All right, die roll. Brett, what do you got this week? Even Forrest is partaking.
Yeah, I've only got one. There's this isolated medieval graveyard where somebody had buried a porpoise. They're not quite sure how or why, but yes, a porpoise, dolphin-like creature buried. Looks like it wasn't dumped in a hole from what they can see. That was properly prepared and buried there. And that's the type of shit I read this, and I keep thinking this is like a bizarre, if not a Cthulhuid thing, it's a mystic world. It just makes me scream of something that if I had Ken Hite sitting next to me, we'd be riffing on why you're burying porpoises. And there's got to be a reason, and I'm pretty sure there are reptoids and other things involved, but it's absolutely gameable. So there you go. Medieval porpoise burial. Sean, over to you.
Submit your Gumshoe character sheets. It's for the Gumshoe character app that I believe they are using submissions to help out with the app, create the app. It's a way to make it better. So if you're a Gumshoe player and you want a Gumshoe app and want to make it better, and you've got some character sheets that have worked for you, Pelgrim Press wants to know. It's a partnership with the site that I get a link to. Number 2, happy 80th birthday to The Hobbit. 21st of September was 80 years.
Very cool.
Wow.
The Hobbit that dropped. Crazy.
It's crazy. It's been around that long and still really, really cool.
Hopefully we'll be around for the 11th birthday.
That's what I want. Oh, you're dead right. That's great. I gotta get if we survive that long, it's gotta be a whole batch of us partying like hobbits somewhere. That's what it's gonna be.
I'll still be working, so I'm sure.
I think we all will.
Number 3, Goodman Games provides an update into the Borderlands. So for those of you that are not aware, Goodman Games announced at GaryCon last year that they would make some of the original
That was this year. Actually.
modules.
It was March of this year.
Was
dude.
it this year?
Yeah,
It was at GaryCon
2017.
Yep. I was there.
I think because next year would be the next GaryCon. That's
Correct.
what I looked at
Yes.
last year. But anyways, it's little kind of more finicky than some people might be led to believe. So if you want some updates, look at Goodman Games, subscribe to him on Twitter and get those updates. But I thought it was kind of interesting. Talked about, the OCR wasn't like, they were old. I mean, they're not scanned for optical character resolution, so it's not text. And then they had to change that and some of the art. So I thought it was interesting.
It was. I was there as well, Forrest, for the What's New with Goodman Games. It was a really interesting talk, and to listen to all the guys there talking about it, and it was really cool.
That was fascinating.
Really cool.
It really was fascinating.
All right, Forrest, what you got this week?
So I had to ask permission of you guys to share something that's new to me, but probably old to a lot of other people. And that is, I picked up the book recently, Stealing Cthulhu by Graham Walmsley. And
That book is awesome.
it is awesome. I had no idea. I heard rumors here and there. I didn't pick up the PDF, just mostly because I saw the cover and I was like, wow, that's awesome. I got to have that in hard copy. So through the Goblin Emporium on Google Plus, I was able to secure a copy. So I just read that, did a little pithy review on my blog about it. Good luck finding a hard copy. They're really hard to find.
Yeah, I got one at Gen Con the year it came out.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky.
Yeah,
I should have bought a
I
case
was-
of them because I could be making money.
I was just lucky, right person, right time. Somebody was like, yeah, I've been wanting to sell them. I'm like, okay, game on. How much do you want? But really, it's fantastic. And it's all about, stealing stories, plots, creatures, from Lovecraft stories and others, as well. I think there's a Ramsey Campbell story they reference there. And, it essentially says take everything that these authors wrote, mash it up in a blender, and start pulling bits out and putting them together and see what you get. That's the really crude version of it, but it actually is fantastic if you're looking for. And I'm thinking not just for adventures, but also just for writing fiction, because I do that too. It's kind of almost like a William Burroughs cut up method of creating fiction. So anyway, it's really cool. You got to read it. The PDF's available at RPG Now. And again, good luck finding a hard copy. You can have mine if you pry it from my cold, dead hands. Otherwise, you're not getting it. Then the other thing I had was that there's a record number of flying humanoid sightings over Chicago this year.
I had heard
As
this.
opposed to previous years where there weren't as many flying humanoid sightings, but apparently there's some every year, I guess.
Yeah,
So-
this was on what the hell? Ken and Robin talk about stuff covered it as well, because of course Ken's in Chicago. But he talked about it a little bit, and I've not mentioned it on the show before, so I'm glad you brought this up. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I who knows what's going on. I'm thinking people with drones are just messing with people, but in any case, hashtag roll for initiative, right?
That's awesome. I hadn't thought about that fact, but yeah, somebody with a drone just kind of flying around this bat-winged humanoid. This is going to be funny.
Yeah, because
that's
you can.
awesome.
Why not?
Well, of course, why not? That's awesome. All right, we had a couple from listeners. Matt Bonhoff provided us with some nightmare fuel about Oscar the Modular Body. It's a video. It's disturbing.
That's really disturbing.
Little bits of body with like battery attached, so you can kind of click it together and make a little body that is like an appendage that flips and flops, and it's very Reanimator. That's what it feels like to me when I watch that. I'm like, oh, that's fucking creepy. Especially the horrible, sickly, veiny, lumpy parts. It's gross. Anyway, Michael Parker told us about these horrible undersea jelly blobs that will no doubt kill us all. So a link in the show notes there. There's always, the ocean has nothing but shit that wants to kill us. So just one more proof of that. And let's see. Oh, Eli Kurtz has mentioned some more about the X card and how it's evolved over time. So the X card, we've talked about that on the show before too. Kind of one of those pieces that when you're at convention games, especially, and sometimes even at home games, it's a handy way to have people who might want to opt out of a thing, whatever that might be in your game, or a game someone else is running where you can just kind of tap the card and stop the action for a moment. So kind of a cool read. Anything else, Sean?
No, I don't think so. What are we talking about? Oh, actually, there is one more thing.
What do you got?
Skill check.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
I don't have it. I don't have an intro for skill check.
That's
God damn
okay.
it.
We don't need one.
Since Forrest is a guest on the show, Forrest, are you ready for skill check?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Let's go. Let's play skill check. All right, Forrest, GM or player?
Actually, player.
Whoa.
Surprise, huh?
Yeah,
All right.
actually, I'm very surprised.
It's because I'm lazy. That's why.
Well, you know,
Points for honesty. Points for honesty.
players usually are Forrest. Fighter, magic user, thief, or cleric?
Thief. Absolutely thief.
I knew that was coming. I follow you on G+.
PC death. Great for story, or please don't kill my character.
Oh, great for story.
Rules lawyer, power gamer, or what is that last one I have? AC Tor? What?
Actor?
What is that?
Actor.
Actor. That's what it is. Actor. My enunciation and my spelling is like, oh my God.
Let's see. Rules lawyer, no. Power. I'd have to go with actor of those three.
Actor.
Yeah.
Rule 0, or I'm a player and I have equal rights.
What do you mean by rule 0 exactly?
GM's always right, man.
No.
Right? Rule 0 is the GM. You defer to the GM.
I'll say
whatever the GM.
Tending towards rule 0.
Favorite RPG?
Oh my gosh. I can't. Can I give you 3? I like my top 3.
Top 2.
Top 2. Okay.
We'll split the
Dungeon Crawl Classics, Call of Cthulhu.
What edition of Call of Cthulhu?
7th ed.
Ooh.
Really?
Yep. Love the new one. Love it.
Last one. RPG you're playing in the next week or month.
Let's see. DCC and AD&D 2nd edition, and possibly Delta Green.
Is that in the next month or next week?
That's in the next month. I wish
Okay.
I had that much time to game in a week.
Oh, no. I mean, I've heard crazier things.
Yeah. No, I think my wife would not like that very much. That'd be marriage limiting maneuver.
Exactly.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show for us. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks for being a patron of the show also.
Oh, you bet. And thanks for having me. Really appreciate the invite.
So if they could find you and they want to know more about Forrest or what Forrest is doing, where do they find you? Where do they go? What things do you have going on?
So you can go to, well, first of all, I should state the spelling of my name so you know. It's Forrest, and my last name is spelled Aguirre, although it's pronounced Aguirre. So Forrest Aguirre. If you go to Twitter, I'm at Forrest Aguirre. And on Google Plus, I'm there. You'll find my icon with me wearing my fez. Also, I have a blog over at forrestaguirre.blogspot.com. And yeah, that should give you plenty of opportunities to interact.
Glowburn.
Oh, and
Glowburn.
Glowburn. Yes, how did I not mention that? Yeah, I'm also one of the
Hit that
co-hosts of the
show.
Glowburn podcast. And you can find that at Glowburn on Twitter, or Google Plus is a good place to look as well. There's a Glowburn community there.
Sweetness. Thank you again so much, Forrest. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Brett, what are we talking about next week, Brett?
Well, my buddy Tom Flanagan and I were bullshitting on the chat the other week, and I said, "You got an idea? What are you thinking of for topics? What should we talk about?" And he said, "You know what? How about re-energizing your game?" So, hey, Sean, we're gonna talk about re-energizing that game of yours. That's what we're gonna
Like
do.
the Energizer Bunny,
Exactly. Get you hopping.
but on your game. Sweet. All right. So this has been another episode of Gaming NBS. I'm one of your hosts, Sean.
And I'm Brett. Good night and good game and all.
This episode of Gaming NBS brought to you with the help from the following patrons: Christian Sexy Voice Serrano, Kevin Lovecraft, Joe Swick, Brett's Biggest Fan, Jeff Rademacher, Forrest DeGary, Mark Anthony Benedetti, Eric Jeppesen, Andy Hall, Sean Nicholson, Tim Jensen, Knights of the Night Crew, Palladian, Remy Belludo, Jason Hobbs, Wayne Humphrey, James Carpio, Doc Caprio, Pure Mongrel, Lord Tentacle, Corey Johnston, Eric Tankar, Brandon Barnes, Tim Shorts, Dan LaValle, C.W. Mellencamp, Lost Sailor, Graham Miner, Todd McGowan, Roger Brassett, Misdirected Mark Productions, Old School DM, Jason, Christopher Gray, Finn Ulf, Merkel Froelich, Eileen Barnes, Tony Sugarloaf Baker, Todd Crapper, Jim Fitzpatrick, Michael Drescher, with Static, Alexander Auerbach, Rodrigo Beowulf, Neil Benson, Ron Blessing, Chris Steele, Eric the Hoffman, Jared Rasher, Soldiers of Misfortune RPG, Christopher Lang, Curtis Takahashi, Gordon Cranford, Mark Tasaka, Larry Hout, Evan Harrison Cass, Ray Otis, Mark CMG Clover, Eli Kurtz, Ron Bishop, Stefan Dragonspawn, The Closet Gamer, John Hammersley, Craig Huber, Xavier Guilmain. I believe I did that right. For the cost of a coffee shop coffee, you could support the entire show for a month. Consider heading over to gamingandbs.com/Patreon. It's Patreon. Thanks, patrons. Thanks, friends.
This has been a Litterbox Studio production.